we had a great session yesterday, and we're excited to kick off today's session as well. So just first, to our participants also, I want to thank you for joining us. If you've been thinking about or posting an idea, this is a great time to get a little bit of expert advice to help guide that submission in the final days. Our ideas phase closes this Friday at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time, so please be aware of that time. And for those of you who may have already submitted an idea, a lot of these discussions that we'll be having today are actually themes that have directly emerged from what we're seeing on the challenge platform. So a lot of our discussion topics have been pulled from our recurring themes, ideas that have overlapping concepts, and just generally patterns that we're seeing on the platform. So we really wanted to take the time to address some of those, as well as some of the pros, the cons, what needs to be considered both from a materials, a design, or a circular perspective when we're talking about these types of solutions. So we'll kick it off and get started right away, as we have a lot to cover in this short hour. And we'll move on and have our presenters introduce themselves. I'll start. So my name is Chris Crone. I'm the challenge manager for the Circular Design Challenge. So I've been working very closely with our sponsors, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, amongst others, to sort of frame and shape the challenge, developing all of the resources that you've seen on the platform, as well as bringing together partners and building networks around this important topic. And we'll kick it off to Angus. You're muted, Angus.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay, just a brief introduction. I set up Splosh.com a few years ago. Splosh sells refillable home cleaning, laundry, and personal care products. We sell them in the UK. Because our products are refillable, we cut plastic waste by 95%, and our business model avoids supermarkets and sells direct to consumers.
Excellent. I think Gonzalo's having some tech trouble, so we'll hop right over to our next panelist.
That would be me, I think. My name is Jan Leijsens. I am the CEO of Regenerative Design, which is a design agency working on strategic business design for circular economy and social innovation.
I guess that means it's me. So my name's Joe Murphy. I work at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and I manage the CE100 program, which is a pre-competitive innovation platform bringing together corporates, startups, governments and cities, academics, and other NGOs to problem solve and prototype circular economy solutions.
So we'll pass over to Laura. I think you're muted. Perfect.
Am I on now? Okay. My name is Laura Dickinson. I'm the executive director and co-founder of OSC Squared. That stands for One Step Closer to an Organic Sustainable Community. And it's a network of CEOs, founders, and leading mission-driven food and natural products companies who come together to address big and hard regenerative and sustainability issues. So two industry projects we lead are the Packaging Collaborative and the Climate Collaborative, both of which together represent over about 160 brands and primarily of mission-driven food and natural product companies.
Hello, everyone. My name's Nick Cliff. I am an innovation lead at Innovate UK. We are the UK government's innovation agency. So we exist to support companies to develop new technologies, products, services, and we provide support through funding and connecting people to the partners they need to make their ideas succeed. And I have a particular focus on waste, recycling, and circular economy projects. Thank you.
Hi, Nina Goodrich. I'm the Executive Director of Green Blue and the Sustainable Packaging Corporation, and we work with folks all along the supply chain to help create more sustainable packaging.
All right, excellent. Well, thanks so much to our panelists. We're really excited to get things started. So let's just jump right in to our first topic. So I won't give much of a background on this. Wanted to really open the floor here for our panelists. So what are the three biggest hurdles one might face when developing a circular solution within the packaging or plastic space? And our first respondent is Angus.
Hello there. Yes, so I'm going to give you just a few thoughts, and I think the easiest thing is if I base the thoughts on the experience I've had in setting up Splosh. I think the biggest issue to overcome is what I would call customer acceptance. Certainly in the case of Splosh, my competitors have had many years and have spent countless millions of pounds in developing brands, the basis of which have encouraged consumers to behave in a certain way. For example, to take a simple idea, laundry detergent is bought in a bottle and that bottle is thrown away, and then you go back to the supermarket to repurchase it. With Splosh, we've had to change that behavior and to change the attitude towards that purchase behavior. And that is a real challenge to encourage people to buy direct and to buy refills that fit through your letterbox. It's not impossible at all. I think consumers are now very open to changing behavior. Particularly, I think it's 40% of consumers are now happy to base their purchase on environmental considerations. So I think all I would say about that is just to think as laterally as you can about your marketing, and to quote Steve Jobs, always just think about your customer in terms of that. A second challenge that we've faced at Splosh has been product development. This has been enormously time consuming and expensive, and I think my advice would be just accept that the first iteration of the product that you develop may well not be right. Don't worry about that. I think that's quite normal. You may have to go through several iterations before you have the right product. Certainly in the case of Splosh, we've used a number of formulators. Many people have said what we were trying to do was impossible. We've just kept on carrying on, kept on being enthusiastic, kept on believing in what we wanted to achieve at the end. And fortunately, we are now in a position of having what I think is a great series of products. And I think a third hurdle that I would point to is moving to scale. This is or has been a major issue for us at Splosh. To give you a small example, bottles are, to produce a completely new bottle, you need to have a mold for that bottle, and that's very expensive to get the mold. How do you fund that when your competitors have massive, very large-scale production? We've found ways around that. We've had to think a bit laterally, in our case, initially we purchased bottles that were available elsewhere. As we've expanded, we've been able to buy molds ourselves. It does take time as well. So I think moving to scale, I would say, is a huge challenge. And I think underneath that, from the entrepreneur's point of view, that is all going to cost money. And my sort of advice there is in whatever deal you do, when hopefully people come to fund you, is to hang on to your shares as if your life depended upon it. So.
Excellent.
That was about 3 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think those are some great pointers, Angus, especially given your sort of heads down experience in actually building and starting a large company in this space. So we'll pass it off to Jan for his perspective.
All right. A lot of noise.
All right, so I think the three biggest hurdles, the three biggest hurdles I see when designing for circular economy, but also for the packaging and the plastic space, is first of all the systemic approach.
Please, if you're not speaking, for those of us participating, please be sure to mute your microphones so we have clear audio.
Right. So I think the first one is the systemic approach, which is basically looking at the problem as a part of a bigger system rather than just an isolated issue. So this also means looking at what is the root cause and what is the result of something. But this also means that if you are designing a solution, you're not designing a product, you're designing a solution, which means that the product itself is just a derivative of your analysis of the system where that problem happens. And the moment that your product is no longer a fit for the solution you're trying to create, you should create something else, and you should always keep looking at how am I impacting the bigger system that I'm trying to shift. So that's the first hurdle I see. Then the second one I think ties in quite with Angus's remark on customer acceptance, which is that if your goal is to have a positive impact on a system or on a specific part of the value chain, you can't do that by focusing mainly on negative impact, because you won't have anyone rallying up for your solution. If your main focus is just reducing negative impact and becoming less unsustainable, chances are you won't become truly sustainable, and people won't really start lining up for your solution. So you have to make sure that your solution has more than just less negative impact than the competitor. You have to have a positive impact or an added value that you can build your model upon, which then comes to hurdle 3, which also ties in with what Angus said on scalability, is the business model. So a business model means that it has to be scalable, because you're basically working on impact and creating impact, and more if you have to make a compromise on the sustainability of your product, but it means largely increasing the acceptance of a market and really shifting the behavior of customers, chances are that your impact is bigger than if you go all the way for a radical product or a radical solution and nobody's willing to buy it. So look at who your customers are, what they're looking for, and if you're looking at the money issue of scalability, I think there's a lot of answers to be found in what is happening in the maker movement right now, which is basically building prototypes very rapidly, even if they're not the product just yet, but see how people respond to a specific product and go from there.
Excellent, thank you, Jan. I think those are great points. I especially like your focus on sort of focusing on positive impact rather than negative externalities. I think that's really key when we're designing solutions. So we have a couple minutes, and if any of our other panelists have thoughts on this question, we'd love to hear from you.
This is Nina. I would just like to add a quick comment, especially thinking about the recovery side. One of the things that I see are breaking that down into things like collection, sortation, reprocessing, and critically importantly, end markets. So as we think in a circular fashion, that's the piece that's the hardest right now, is what do we do once we've got it? So I would just put those 4 things into one of the hurdles anyway.
Hi, Nick here. This has been briefly, I think, sort of referred to by some of the other panelists, but something that in my extensive experience is a sad but very real hurdle that you do have to face with any change to packaging is cost. Many of the small plastic consumable items, that the point of this challenge is to change, to remove the need to stop them getting and escaping and finding themselves in the wrong place, cost fractions of a pence or fractions of a cent, depending of course where you are. And large retailers, the people that really have the opportunity to scale the use of these items, can be incredibly resistant to change, can be incredibly resistant to increases in cost. So it's vitally important that you base design decisions on that cost factor, or that you engage at a very early stage, right the way up and down the value chain for the packaging item or packaging chain that you're dealing with, and ensure that everyone is aligned. It's a very easy mode of thinking to say this would barely add a tiny cost per unit for a new design. But if you consume 100,000 or 100 million of those items a year as a large brand or retailer, that's a big uptick in cost that you have to be able to cope with, and that can be a big barrier to overcome for a new packaging format or solution.
Yeah, so it's Joe Murphy here. I'd just like to echo that. Actually, I think that's what we see kind of day to day across our kind of corporate partnerships with C100 is we love it, love circular economy, we'll definitely apply it. Has to be at bare minimum cost parity, right? You cannot bring in a solution that's going to be more expensive. Another way of reframing that question, though, is to think about, again, it goes back to that meeting that unmet customer need. So if you were to position something as being able to generate maybe extra revenue, increasing kind of value to the customer, that could be worth a few extra cents. So I think, there is a way to interpret and put that background, but the business model does have to balance at the end of the day.
I love that. Thank you both. I think those are really key and also comes up quite frequently in our research and our discussions with corporate stakeholders. So I also love the positive spin, Joe, in sort of assessing the cost increase and then mitigating that through other means. So I think that's great for all of us to consider. So moving right along into our second topic question. And so this is directly pulled from some of the themes that we've been seeing on the challenge. We're seeing a lot of ideas focused around new product dispenser delivery models. And so most of these are focused on eliminating single-use sachets. In some ways, it may be a smart workaround for some of the points that Joe and Nick just made about cost and coming up with a new delivery model to mitigate what otherwise may be more expensive packaging solutions. But essentially, sachets are notorious for material complexity, small formats, and tendency to leak. So we're seeing users who want to design away these formats entirely. So we wanted to talk about some of the most prevalent barriers to entry, as well as provide some key design opportunities areas here. And so we'll pass it off to Laura, who will share her viewpoints on this topic.
Thank you, Chris. So am I on? I'm on, right? Yeah. Great. So the three areas that we see as being key considerations are, to dovetail on the past conversation, price, performance, and then downstream infrastructure. So with Series2, we developed a compostable packaging suite of solutions for food companies. And I think this is somewhat analogous to the new delivery models for dispenser systems. What we looked at was those single-use pouches and sachets, primarily in consumer packaged goods like an energy bar, a tea bag, or a pouch of rice, are all going straight to landfill. They may be lighter weight, but they have no end of life. And so our solution was to, and it continues to be, to look at compostable. I think it's analogous in the three areas I talked about. Number one, because we have real life experience seeing what brands will do when presented with a solution that's more expensive. So we tested these, we had a team of packaging designers develop real 6 kinds of different compostable packages and then test them across 20 different ingredients, everything from baby food to potato chips to chia seeds, and figured out which ones worked best. No surprise, the dry products work best. And we're fortunate enough to have one pioneering company in Alter Eco take the package to market. There's been a tremendous upside potential for Alter Eco in terms of the marketing benefit they received and the industry support. However, the price point for these compostable packages on a good day is 70% more. And so what we've been watching is we're proving the performance side of it and also the pricing side of it. From a performance perspective, we know the package works and has appropriate barrier properties for dry products and works through the distribution system, which is great. And so we've overcome that in certain products. However, at 70% more, naturally brands are slow to uptake. We are seeing, we have teas and chips and rices testing the product right now, which is really encouraging, their products on these packages. But, for a sweeping solution to take place, the price point really needs to be between probably, 5 and 10% higher. Our industry is new in terms of new packaging solutions. We're competing against a 60-year-old petroleum-based dynasty, and so it will take time to reduce the price differences. One of the things to think about when looking at a new kind of dispenser system is not just the price, but also the profit margin of each individual item. So for a packaged baby food that's $1 a pouch, that's a lot harder to absorb, 2 or 3 points of margin in pennies than a $24 bottle of turmeric capsules. However, the consumer pain point is much higher for the baby food pouch. You're seeing this go into trash. So, we're continuing to work on this, but we see a lot of, this being a long-term process to close that pricing gap. And that's the big thing, is how do you close that pricing gap or find products that can absorb the margin better. Second is performance. Brands will not trade off on performance. So, and a lot of, we're still saying we've done a lot, to kind of prove performance, but only in certain products. There's still a trade-off in terms of shelf life in some instances. And so how can you guarantee as good or better performance? It's tricky with the more sustainable solution, but there are options, and it takes a lot of innovation. With Alter Eco, one of the things they did was was pretty creative, was they removed the zipper, both to reduce the price and also guarantee there were no seal issues, which we were seeing with some of the new issues. So there are ways around both issues, but there's always a trade-off. The third thing to think about is downstream infrastructure. So waste facilities, as folks all here know, are not well developed for a lot of new solutions. There are 5 areas of the country that take compostable. If you talk to the waste facility managers, they're hand sorting, out a lot from a compostable standpoint and also recyclable. And they know right now those green biobags in our network, and we work with them quite a lot. They know what those are, but they don't know what other packages are, even if it is a compostable product. And so we need to create a system-wide solution, which we're looking at in terms of a communication system that allows not just consumers to sort it the right way, but also the waste facilities to understand what they're getting and where it goes, because they may, the right kind of package may get all the way to the right place and then get pulled out anyway if it's not recognized by the waste sorters. So those are 3 areas to consider.
Thanks so much, Laura. And I love your last point. I think that's something that we're seeing come up a lot is, it's just such a complex system, and really understanding and taking that time to do the research, especially on the downstream, and understanding how that local municipality works, right? Because it varies by region, by city, by country. So coming up with solutions and working into the design process, systems that are going to accommodate the variability of composting and systems infrastructure, I think is really key. So thank you for that. So we'll pass it off to Nina for her perspective.
Great, thank you very much. Well, I'd like to start really by picking up on some of the things that Laura just said. When it comes to composting in particular, one of the things that the Sustainable Packaging Corporation coalition has pulled together is a how to compost label. And that's absolutely designed to do just what Laura was suggesting, to help not only the consumers sort the items properly, but also when it does get into an industrial composting facility, to provide some level of assurance that this particular product is in fact compostable as opposed to the alternative. And some cities have done some exciting things. The city of Seattle has basically said that anything that's green has to be compostable. So if you have a green bag for produce, it has to be compostable, because one of the biggest difficulties is sorting out ahead of time what is going to work in the system and what isn't. And quite frankly, we're at a tipping point or a threshold, especially in North America, where we could see compostable packaging kept out of the composting system if we can't figure out a way to help that infrastructure build with packaging being part of the solution. So we absolutely don't want to see that, because we do know that packaging helps capture food waste, and that's something that we want to ensure gets composted. But back to sort of the main question or the theme here in terms of key systems, I mean, I want to pick up on what Jan and Joe said initially, which is really, what is the delivery system being hired to do? So if we're thinking about new delivery methods, really understanding from the perspective of reliability, serviceability, system cost, ease of use, and really importantly, trust, because I think that's really the scariest part of changing the delivery system, is how do we keep that brand trust? And one of the things that Amazon said recently that really resonated was, when folks go online to look at a product, they don't have the same visual cues that they used to have in terms of size or shape. The package doesn't play the same role. And in these new delivery systems, I think it'd be interesting to think about what's the role that the internet can play to help us create the story or the brand value behind some of these new delivery systems. And then I think also looking to successful models that are already using some new delivery systems, which include, I think, some of the yogurt and ice cream, which is self-serve, and you can add and mix and make your own. Some of the new microbrewery beer delivery systems, where you have a card or a band on your wrist, and you can self-select and self-fill. So I think there's a lot of good working systems out there that we can use as models to help understand that job that delivery system is being hired to do, especially when we're replacing packaging and have to really understand those things that delight and excite customers. That really resonated to me, when you can add something in addition.
Thanks, Dinah. I really like that, those points that you made. So let's open up to the rest of the panelists. If anybody has thoughts or discussion points, feel free to jump in.
So I think maybe, so we talked a lot about biodegradable. I think another model that's happening a lot, but I don't see it happening just yet that much in packaging, is if it's not compostable, take back system. So how can you make sure that whatever leftover of your product is coming back to you? If it's the easiest way is if the packaging becomes a functional part of your product, because at that point you can bring it back for repair or upgradability. So maybe if you look at packaging more than just the foil around the product and as a part of the product, that might help in getting the materials back to your facilities.
Perfect. Shall I just jump in here?
Absolutely.
Yeah, just to say, I think that if you move towards a circular economy, I think we should be looking at this as an opportunity rather than a problem, because it's a great way or opportunity to redesign a fundamental way that the consumers deal with the product. A sort of light bulb moment for me was, we were talking about costs a little while ago, that a bottle, here's one of this is a surface cleaner. This would cost, let's take a figure, say 30-40p, the dispenser and the bottle. Now, when that's thrown away, it probably has a net negative value to society, but actually it does have a value to the manufacturer of that bottle, i.e. Splosh. So using our distribution model, we're able to ensure that bottle, that value remains with us, the manufacturer, which means that we can increase our margin. I think we just one other point just to make was made a little while ago. Another area where I think that we can, the circular economy has really helped us, has been that we sell direct, so we don't sell through supermarkets, and our refills come in small boxes. So we use those same small boxes to allow customers to send back pouches to us, which we can in turn refill. So, and because our sort of talking about having a slightly higher margin, the cost of sending back the refills is about the same as manufacturing the pouches, the refill pouches in the first place. So I think distribution in the circular economy represents a great opportunity, is really what I wanted to say.
Maybe just one thing to add. I think residual value is the kind of key thing to think about here. So, in the example Angus just gave, the dispenser has a residual value inherently because there's been a lot of embedded energy and there are some materials that have gone into making that product. And the question is residual value to who, right? So the end consumer with an empty dispenser, that's very little value to them. And yes, if they just trash it, it's a negative, net negative impact on society. But that has a residual value to someone in the system. So designing products with, I don't know if you need to have thought through the complete kind of utopian flow of where these end up. But if there is a thought to the residual value that's being kind of designed into the product, into the packaging, you're creating an opportunity or a potential revenue stream for someone else in the system. So I think there are kind of two angles into it, and it's not, there isn't, well, there are lots of angles into it, and it's not one size fits all. But considering an element of residual value in the packaging in the product is an important way of keeping value in the system.
Yeah, again around, I think the splosh model, which I'm happy to say I'm a very recent convert to myself, so a new adopter. But again, what's I think brilliant about that particular example is the fact that by conceiving of a system where you are taking the product out of a whole load of existing and entrenched business models allows you the opportunity to do something truly circular. If you look at, and I've seen in the past, dispenser-based projects, refillable bottle projects, where the underlying technology itself has worked wonderfully, beautifully designed bottles, absolutely fabulously designed dispensing systems, amazing products, very easy to use, but these things fall apart if consumers don't remember to bring the bottles back. They fall apart if you haven't failed to take account of the floor space allocation changes you are asking a retailer to make. They are set up to sell things on shelves, and if you suddenly say, I've got to have this super sexy filling machine at the end of an aisle, but it needs power, and maybe it needs water connection if you're shipping concentrates, things like that. So it's just the importance of considering the whole of the distribution delivery system when you come up with and consider new designs for dispensing systems.
Yeah, I love that, Nick. And I wanted to bring that and tie that back to a point earlier that Nina made, is sort of addressing like loss of brand value and like brand recognition in that. So how is I don't know, just how does a dispenser model maybe account for that and bring up and sort of mitigate the loss of brand recognition? That's open to all.
Oh, so again, one of the things about, I've also seen that exact same challenge, because often you'll find that a brand will consider switching to a refillable or a dispensing based system, providing they can retain their brand exclusivity over that offer. And it's hard enough to make the changes to an individual brand's supply chain. So from their suppliers through to the dispenser manufacturers, to things that, even with them allowed to plaster their brand all over it. But if you were to go into a system where, in essence, you're using, imagine a bottle that could be refilled by multiple different brands. have all sorts of challenges, even more difficult thing to unpack. And very difficult to get agreement between brands without suddenly accusations of cartels and price fixing and things of that issue. You very quickly run into sort of people who will use free market as a barrier again that you need to overcome.
Perfect. So thank you all for those points. I thought they were just right on target and really aligned actually with some of the themes and the problem areas that we're seeing on the platform and with some of the solutions that are working in the space. So hopefully our participants got some nice bits of information there. So moving right along to our third topic question. So this is directly coming from ideas that we're seeing that are essentially working on merging formats. So this could come in a variety of complexities, ranging from, say, items that are trying to combine a straw, a lid, and a cup, for instance. Items that are combining lids or cups. These are often addressing what a lot of the themes we're seeing are addressing the coffee and the straw issues. So sort of combining these what is typically multiple formats or 3 or 4 pieces that make up a whole part and sort of consolidating them into a single piece. This may also use one type of plastic or one type of material rather than using 3 or 4 or 5 in it. And so we want to just discuss, what are sort of the benefits of merging 2 small format items? Will it be economically viable from a recyclability standpoint? And what are some of the material or design considerations that one must take? So our question is, what needs to be considered when merging formats, and how will these designs impact recyclability in terms of system capacity? And we'll hand it over to Nick as our first respondent.
Okay, gosh, everything, consider everything, and then consider everything that you've forgotten or didn't know. So I'm going to start by suggesting that, looking over some of the ideas that have already been posted, and there's some amazing stuff, there's some great designs. But the first thing that I would immediately say, if you haven't already, something to think about to start with, is the simple manufacturability. Have you designed with the manufacturing process in mind? Have you designed something that can be made, but can be made at a much higher cost than the current price point for the equivalent mix of products that you're replacing? Is your new design going to carry, as was referred to earlier, incredibly high startup tooling costs? And who's going to cover that capex? Can what you've designed actually be manufactured? And can it be manufactured in the facilities that you have? In some cases, some of the ideas, although I don't doubt could be manufactured, are not going to be readily manufacturable through the range of manufacturing processes present in the plastics packaging supply trade. If it can't be blow molded or compression molded, or even in some extreme cases rotor molded, or pressed from 2D materials, or you're asking for some clever, novel, but technically very difficult combination of those programs, you're going to run into problems. The second point I would say always consider is the usability. How well does this proposed merged format perform? So at the moment, if we take the example of cup and lid and straw and things of that nature, there's all sorts of benefits from having those things separately. They're easy to stack for the most part, they're easy to assemble, and they give you flexibility of format. I can have a cup with a lid, I can have a cup with just a straw, I can have a cup with a lid and a straw, depending on my mood or the product that's being contained. Some of the challenges as well around the fact of integrating and merging formats is you increase the capacity for failure. So an integral straw is great. So for example, I occasionally like to buy my children little cartons of juice that come with a little integral straw attached. But if that straw gets damaged damaged, you're in trouble. And if you've got an integral straw molded into a product and that gets crushed for some reason, you can't just replace the straw easily, whereas with a separate straw you can. And then finally, the last area is absolutely to concern yourself with is around the recyclability. And recyclability is a hideously complicated question. For the most part, the small items that this design challenge is targeting are literally small enough to fall through the cracks. Most of the recycling facilities are gauged at recycling things of a particular size. And that size, to be honest, in the case of plastics recycling, is pretty much bottle size. So unless you get something up to a bottle size, you're already going to be facing challenges of the ability of existing recycling facilities to identify, sort, and then reprocess that material. There's no easy answer to that. It takes a long time to change a recycling facility. It takes they're low margin businesses. There's a lot of investor worry about it. They like to recycle what they know they can recycle to a high value. So my genuine, honest advice is, again, ask a recycler. Take your idea, take your format, and see if you can find someone that recycles these things and get their advice. Ask how it will perform. Before I joined Innovate, I used to work at a plastic bottle recycling facility, and perhaps we were unusual, but we opened the doors to designers because we recognized that the people designing the packaging formats are effectively our ultimate supplier. The decisions made at the design stage are crucial to the success and viability of any recycling business. And for the most part, hopefully, if you can engage them politely and get around the fact that most recyclers tend to look a bit shell-shocked and browbeaten, go and talk to them, understand what works and what doesn't work, and base your design decisions on what the practical recycling systems that exist are. Okay.
Excellent. Great points, Nick. And I also think it highlights just the complexity of the problem. And so it's just a great point to remind us to sort of follow every one of those paths as much as possible. And so we'll pass it off for our next respondent to Joe.
Great, thanks. I mean, Nick did such a great job there. I'm just going to jump on maybe and embellish a little bit of the final point there, which is around the kind of after use. And really taking into consideration that system perspective. And I just want to build on the idea of residual value. Sorry, is that really loud in the background? Someone moving a table behind me. I'm gonna persevere through. So the idea of residual value. So if we're going to be making a merging format application, and it's going to have multiple materials in it, then immediately you're going to cause a problem for purity of waste streams after use. So the residual value question comes into, how easy will it be to separate those different material streams, and bearing in mind that there's a cost to whoever does that. Is that automated, or are there people literally unclipping bits of packaging? So if you're not going to use multiple materials, you're using a single material, you're much more likely to be designing in residual value into that item. Obviously, it depends where it's being sold, what the collection processes are in that region, and what the recycling processes are, but you're giving it its best bet of being able to be collected and processed economically. So I think it does just come down to those considerations. Using multiple materials, think about modular design, think about ease to disassemble. Otherwise, stick with a single material where possible.
Great points, Joe. So we'll open it up to the rest of our panelists for thoughts on this topic.
Can I just say a word on this? One of the issues that we came across was when we moved some of our concentrate refills to pouches, that the pouches are made of double layered laminate, which we're told just can't be recycled. So that's just not going to work for us, because the whole model is about reducing plastic waste to ultimately zero. So we did a deal, we've done a deal with TerraCycle, and what we worked out is that the reason these pouches can't be recycled is because they all come in at different times and different places into the recycling stream. If you get all of them together in bulk of the same material, then they can be recycled. So that means that we can, and ultimately we can control the types of products, when we get up to bigger volume, that they can be reprocessed to. Who knows, they could even be reprocessed into household products that we could then sell, and so the circle goes on. So again, rethinking the distribution model has allowed us to collate the pouches, which has allowed us to drive down plastic waste to zero.
Angus, can I just ask you a quick question on that? So, you're when you are getting back a batch of those formats, so they are originally a multi-layer package. So does that mean that what you're left with is a kind of something that is a mixture of the two kind of polymers, essentially, that then can be applied into a limited set of applications, because it is a mixture and therefore it can't guarantee the properties that pure streams of EVA would do in the first place?
Hello. Yes, it's as I understand. I'm not an expert on this, but yes, I think it is quite limited, the applications. I should say though that when customers send back the pouches, it's absolutely not our intention for them to go straight off to TerraCycle. We want them to be reused as many times as possible first. We think 3 is about the right number, but who knows, it could be more than that.
Excellent. I'm wondering, just given your all sort of expertise and exploration of this space, where might, we have such a range of ideators on the platform, from established startups to very early stage innovators and designers. Where might one start to answer some of these questions if they're trying to understand how their design might impact the supply chain and how their design might affect recyclability processing? What's a good place to start for that?
This is Nina. If I could jump in, I think the APR in North America anyway, the Association of Plastic Recyclers, has a great database and knowledge. We can also be helpful in that space. I think the Recycling Partnership is another organization that has a great deal of knowledge in terms of what's accepted and also what's the value. I wanted to build on what Joe had said earlier about making sure that you're not combining multiple materials together that then have to be separated. It's also important to look at where is their value for end markets. So things like polypropylene, high-density polyethylene, PET, tend to be materials that have some level of value as long as they're relatively clean. So films, once they're dirty, really have almost no value at all. So it's really important to try to understand where that material fits into its next life.
Yeah, as a former recycler, absolutely true. The first, for a recycling technology, the first thing you need is quantity. You've got to have enough of the material to make a recycling process worthwhile. And for the most part, enough material equates to tens, if not hundreds, of tons on a weekly or monthly basis. That's a lot of straws, or a lot of coffee cups, or a lot of pouches. It's not to say it can't be done, but that first and most important thing you need to think about is, where do I secure the quantity? And that's one of the ways in which take back or brand owners retaining ownership of their stock can come into play. Because if you know where stuff is, that's the first half of the battle of getting it back. Next, and as some of the other people have mentioned, you need the right quality for recycling. If you design a packaging format that traps or retains residual content, that's a real headache for recyclers. What you want is the material as clean as possible. And last, but by no means least, people want consistency. You want to know that a bottle or an item has the same amount of a mix of polymers in it, the same colors, all these things that you have to deal with and face.
maybe if I can add on that one. In terms of quantity, I totally agree. If you want to go through a recycling plant, you need as much volume as you can to make it recyclable. And basically, almost any material is recyclable as long as you've got enough of it and it's valuable enough to recycle it. Basically, something that we did here in Belgium with a Fab Lab is basically what we do is we sit together with a recycler and we find the most clean branch of waste stream we can find, and in the Fab Lab we try to create prototypes or new ways of dealing with that material, and then after we got some successful tests we then go again to the recycler because they know most of the times where all the materials lie. So if you can then scale up, that's sort of taking the risk away from the recycler, which is something they prefer not to do. But the moment you are capable of creating new value out of a waste stream, that's the moment that most recyclers, at least in Europe, I think, can get more money for the things they collect.
Well, thank you so much to all our panelists. I thought those are just some really great points, and again, highlight the complexities, but also gave us some great areas to start, especially for our early stage designers. So we'll be moving into, in the last 10 minutes here, our Q&A portion. So as many of our participants know, we had you submit questions onto the platform while you signed up for the webinar. And so we've queued up some of the questions that we think best summarize some of the issues and some of the themes that we're seeing and want to address. So we'll bring in our community manager, Lauren, who some of our participants may have seen commenting on their threads and on their ideas, and she'll lead us through the Q&A section.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, so these are questions from our global community, and we're really excited to hear our panelists' thoughts. So the first question is, how might packaging innovators consider business goals, such as increasing profits and market share, while balancing environmental and sustainability needs? Joe, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Putting me on the spot, Lauren. Well, I think we've covered bits and bobs of this, but maybe just to kind of re-hit on them. I suppose it's if the solution, say if it's a dispenser solution, does that create kind of cost savings to the business model versus what you're doing at the moment? So are there savings that the company's making that they could either pass on to end users or other players in the value chain that could incentivize adoption of that model? So that's maybe on the savings. It might be a bit idealistic to think there will be. If you're adding extra cost with this new format, how do you generate extra value? And I think Splosh is a really interesting example of, and I don't know, it'd be great to hear Angus's take on this, but actually kind of locking in customers to the brand via the format. So you're kind of the convenience factor of having this one bottle, and it's not taking up a huge amount of space in your home, and you can reorder the sachets on a timely basis, so you don't have to go to the shop and get them when you run out. That's creating value for the customer. That's in the long will pay back to the business by customer retention, etc. So I suppose it's maybe just thinking about the two sides of the coin.
Shall I just say a word here? Yeah, I think your business idea has to make financial sense. The first time that I really sort of thought about Splosh, I was doing recycling by the local supermarket, putting plastic bottles into a recycling bin, and I saw a young mum come out with a trolley full of plastic bottles, and I suddenly thought, this is an inefficient business. And I honestly believe that supermarkets are inefficient businesses in terms of their plastic waste and therefore economically. And so I think you can find business models that do rethink many things, not just what's happening to plastic, but other aspects of the business model. So, but yeah, just briefly on locking in customers. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we're going to be launching in the next 6 months in terms of locking in customers. It just strikes me that if, in terms of our business model, if you once you've got the bottle, then with your brand on it, then there's no need for the customer to go back to the supermarket. You completely cut the supermarket out. But there are things we're going to be launching very much over the next 6 months, now that our range is about to move to the next stage, where we are looking to make reordering very much easier for customers. And just briefly, yes, we have found that because refills are so small, they store very neatly, and that's another sort of benefit that customers have. They kind of look like little books on a shelf rather than a mess under the sink. So, yeah.
And maybe just on that, Angus, as you were talking, made me think. So I suppose you now have the direct relationship with the customer, right? So will be building data on consumption habits and usage that otherwise the supermarkets would have held. So I suppose that's another kind of potential value add for you as a business as you start to understand how your different customer segments, how often they buy, what they like to buy, etc. And you keep and retain that information, whereas the supermarket might have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I sometimes think that take Unilever, huge competitor of Splosh. Think of all the millions of pounds they spend on marketing. They don't know their customers' names beyond the names of the supermarkets. The direct connection to customers that the circular economy has allowed us to achieve has all sorts of benefits in the future. For example, promotions. For example, launching new products. So absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks so much to both.
Wonderful. So our next question is from Peter Stair, and he's wondering, is more recyclable preferable to biodegradable plastics or alternative materials? Why or why not? Nina, I would love to hear your thoughts.
This is a really tricky question, and it's a great question because it's one that we're often asked at the Sustainable Packaging Coalition. And as you see corporate goals start to change for 2025 and 2030, you pretty much have these two opposing goals of either more recyclable or lower carbon footprint. And what is the right thing to do? We like to thinking about sourcing. So you can have bio-based that's not necessarily biodegradable or compostable, but or you can have both bio-based and compostable. Under sourcing is also this idea of recycled content. We think about material health. We think about optimization, which is really, especially when you think of a small packet, which this challenge is trying to replace, it has a relatively high ratio of package to product ratio. And so from that perspective, it is a relatively high carbon footprint. So you want to think about that, but you don't want to reduce the package to the point that you destroy the product, because the footprint of the product is always bigger than the footprint of the package. And then we get to recovery. And so they're thinking about composting solutions, which we've already talked about, where we need additional infrastructure. So it's great to start with the products, but you have to also create that infrastructure so that they can be recovered. In recycling, it's the same type of thing where we need markets. We have so many materials that have no markets to go to at this stage that I can't give you a definitive answer of is one better than the other, because there's benefits to all of them. But I think when you have a bio-based material that is also biodegradable or recyclable, then you're kind of hitting two at once. So it's not a definitive answer, but it just says we really have to think about all of those elements: sourcing, material health, optimization, and recovery, to get the best answer. And it depends on where you are and what type of infrastructure you have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. I think those are really valuable and very relevant for all of our ideas to take into account when designing. So our last question is from Jacqueline, and she's wondering, to what extent should all packaging innovation be developed by the market/entrepreneurs versus what must be supported through regulation and policy? If I could hear from Laura.
Well, that's, we're seeing a lot of innovation typically starts with the entrepreneur. They're closest to the need and understanding what is happening actively in the market and what the consumer wants, and they're solving for a consumer need. Ultimately, when I listen to a lot of the programs here, and I hear things like take back, I wonder how much does that match with consumer behavior? Ultimately, if it's easy for the consumer and it doesn't require a behavioral change, they will accept it. And typically, entrepreneurs are most sensitive to that versus policy and regulation. Policy and regulation can support an innovation that works. I think they're very, very important when it comes to facilities management and certifications and supporting innovation that has a chance to take off. But the innovation certainly will start with the packaging, the entrepreneurs. I'd also want to add that recyclable versus compostable is a big question right now. We come firmly in the place, and most entrepreneurs out there and food companies are drawing a conclusion that at this moment, compostable is a better option when it comes to sachets. And that's very clearly listening to experienced packaging engineers and food leaders who are looking at both systems and consumer behavior. Our goal is to remove packaging from landfills, oceans, and planets, and so either system could work, but compostable does one thing that I keep hearing that entrepreneurs are starting to figure out, which is it where recyclable doesn't want any residual food waste, compostable wants residual food waste. And so if we can create a package that actually allows us to collect that food waste, it will start to match with the behaviors of our composting system and encourage them to take back more. And those are kind of subtle things that oftentimes entrepreneurs are seeing and can start to solve for, but certainly downstream with the support of regulation and policy.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Laura. And I think especially given your sort of deep work with all of these various companies and sort of consolidating, I imagine you've seen them really run into this question at various stages of development. So I think it's just great to have your insights. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We're at time, and so we'll just jump in and close out. First, we want to thank our panelists for joining us. As we may have observed, the space is so complex, and it just really takes folks like you who are sort of walking the walk and really spending that time to gain that deep knowledge and coming and sharing it with those of us who want to enter the space is just so valuable. So we really, really appreciate your time, and also just thank you for the wonderful work you're doing in the world. It's so valuable, and we're honored to have you. And thank you to our participants for joining us. If you have not already, please submit your idea by this Friday, the 20th of July at 11:30 p.m. Pacific time. If you have already submitted an idea, hopefully some of these insights and perspectives that we shared today will help you to evolve it in the next couple of days before we close. Also want to note that some of these advisors, many of them will also be offering one-on-one sessions with those ideas that move on to the shortlist. So if you have submitted an idea, get excited and maybe start thinking about who you might want to meet with. We'll do our best to pair based on preference, but it's just really an amazing opportunity to get some one-on-one calls and one-on-one time with some of these advisors and experts. So thank you to everyone, and we look forward to seeing your idea on the platform. All right. Take care, all.